From home is getting more and more risky these days. The number of complaints coming into the FBI every day has quadrupled since before the pandemic, and the agency is getting up to 4,000 complaints a day. And here to shed some light on what's happening is technology expert Dave Hatter, who is socially distancing this morning at the WKRC parking lot. Dave, thanks so much for joining us this morning to talk about this. I guess part of the big problem is there are so many more people who are working from home now, and they may not have the security that's as robust as might be at their workplace, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, John. As always, thanks for having me. Yeah, all these folks were working from home. Many of them were sort of forced out of the office very quickly when the pandemic originally hit. And in most cases, if they're not using equipment provided by their employer, that equipment probably isn't secured the same way that it would be at work. And then they probably have Internet of Things devices, maybe routers that aren't as secure as they would have in their corporate offices. So it's a big change. And then also a lot of people don't really, spend a lot of time thinking about cybersecurity and make sure their devices are updated.
Okay, let's get into what how they're being targeted. These scams, sure. I would think they have to do with the pandemic, with COVID-19, but it's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah. It is a lot more than, there has been a huge increase in pandemic-related scams. The FBI and other government agencies have reported on that, whether it was the PPP program or the tax refunds or just phishing-related scams telling you that you might have COVID and you need to download a form. But all the typical stuff is still out there, too, like ransomware. Ransomware has risen a lot. For those who don't know, ransomware is they encrypt the data on your computer and then tell you have to pay a ransom. In some cases, they'll also threaten to dox you, release that information if you don't pay the ransom, so it's kind of a double whammy. And sometimes you'll see instances where the bad guys will target folks working from home and then attempt to use their home devices as a conduit into the corporate network, because it's one thing to inflict ransomware on one individual worker. It's another thing to be able to encrypt an entire corporate network and hold that company for ransom. So in many cases, the bad guys are going after these home workers because they see that as an entryway into the corporate network where they can inflict a lot more damage and potentially, extract a whole lot more money.
Yeah, and I would suspect that a lot of people who are working from home now are not getting a whole lot of guidance from their employers, who really, this is brand new territory for everybody. So what advice would you have for people?
So first off, don't let your family use the computer that you're using for work. Make sure you have strong, unique passwords for every account. Never share those passwords. Turn on multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication everywhere you can. And it's so critical, John, to make sure that you're installing the software updates, whether it's your phone, your computer, your router, your Alexa device, smart TV, whatever, anything that's connected into that network that could potentially be used by hackers as a leverage point into your corporate network. You got to make sure that you're regularly installing those software updates, because that'll go a long way towards keeping the bad guys out. And, use a virtual private network. There's a whole laundry list of things. We've covered, I think, most of the main ones here.
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to maybe you can explain what it is to people. That it's kind of a pain to me, but I certainly, it has to be a pain for people who are trying to break into your network, is the multi-factor encryption kind of thing, where you have to go through more than one device in order to sign on.
Yeah, so multi-factor authentication, again, sometimes called two-factor authentication or two-step verification, is basically a process where you work with whatever platform you're on to add an additional factor that you need to authenticate, usually some type of 6-digit code that gets texted to you. So even if the bad guys can steal your username and password, even if they can crack your password, they still can't get into that site, because when they try to log in, it's going to send a code to you. So really it does two things. First off, it makes you aware that someone else is trying to log into your account if you start getting these codes that you didn't ask for yourself. And secondarily, while it's not bulletproof, there are ways to work around it. It makes it vastly more difficult for the bad guys to break in, and in most cases, they'll try to move on to a softer target. So both Google and Microsoft have said you can block about 99% of all automated attacks just by turning on multi-factor authentication anywhere and everywhere you can. You should definitely do that.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Dave Hatter, as usual, thank you for your insights and advice. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure, John. A quick shout out to my dad. Happy birthday. It's his 90th birthday. Love you, Dad. Jack Hatter.
All right. Happy birthday to you, Jack, from Good Morning Cincinnati.